Hi everybody, welcome to yet another video. This one is a video on the LS400 Series 2. That's the NSI Water LS400 Series 2. Now I say Series 2 because up until about a year ago there was only the Series 1, which was the original one. They didn't call it a Series 1, they just called it an LS400. That had been out about 12 years. So they came up with a Series 2 and they do it in the WS, which is the clear gun. They do it in a WS OBS, which is the optimized base coat settings gun, and they do the LS, which is this one here. Now this is the HVLP gun. So I will start off that if you're using this at home, they use a hell of a lot of air. So A, they're very expensive, and B, they're very air hungry. So you know, unless you really want a cracking gun, and these are very good guns, and you've got the compressor to power it, I would look elsewhere, because there's plenty of other guns that can lay base coat as good as this, I think, with much less money and much less use of air. So anyway, looking at this as a gun on its own, as I said, I've got Series 1 and I've now got Series 2. I've had this about this is actually the second time I used it, but I've had it about 4 months. This video is about 4 months old anyway, and I'm narrating it now. So I've had it about 4 months, and I've had a reasonable amount of use with it, and I've also pitted it up against the Series 1 just to see what the difference. I haven't done a video on that yet, I will do it at some time, but just to see what the differences were. And I did a video about 2 months ago, something like that, month ago, on the just a spray out of the two different versions. And what you'll see is that the Series 1 and the Series 2 have virtually, they are the same pattern. So that led me thinking that there's not going to be much of a difference between the Series 1 and the Series 2. Now I also did a video and have done several videos on the WS, which is the clear version. So I'll put a link in the description of all the different videos I did, so that you know how I got to what I'm talking about now, or about to talk about now. And that is the fact that with the newer Series 2s, they all have the tip lined up. There's 4 cutouts in the tip, so they all have the tips at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock lined up with the air horns, which is how you would normally use the gun. But what I discovered with the WS is that if you turn the cap around so that the tip cutouts were in line with the air horns, as with the new version, it sprayed exactly the same as the new version. So I was keen to see whether the LS400, this one here, would spray any different to the old version. Now the difference between the LS and the WS, and that goes for the base coat WS as well, is that the WS runs at a higher pressure. They recommend to run it at about 2 bar, and you do need to run it about 2 bar, maybe slightly more, a little bit less, but not far off it. Whereas with the LS, it's recommended at 1.8 bar, which is about 25 psi, and I run it at about 1.7 bar, and I know some people run it down at 1.5 bar. So the pressure's not as great, and also the tip isn't the same. The size of the air holes in the tip of the LS400 Series 1 and Series 2 are smaller than on the WS. So I had a hunch that it actually wouldn't make much of a difference to the LS, the Series 2 compared to the Series 1. There wouldn't be much of a difference, because you didn't get that fan separation that you get with the WS. And so I did a little spray out video, as I say, links in the description, and it's basically proved me right, because I can't see any difference between the Series 1, well, apart from cosmetic differences, I can't see any difference between the Series 1 and the Series 2, the way they spray. They are very good base guns, always have been. The LS400's been a really good base gun. It's good for complex colours, it's good for, in this case, silvers. It's good for most metallic colours and more complex colours, because the atomization is very fine. You can use it at quite a low pressure, so it tends to save materials. as with most HVLP, you tend to be a little bit closer than you would do with a non-HVLP setup, but it works really, really well. So this gun is a cracking gun, but it's no different to the old one. That's what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way. But I want you to know how I got there rather than just, you know, just me say it really. So as I say, there's some links to some other videos, etc., and that might explain to you a little bit better why I was trying the different configurations. But looking at this gun on its own, as I say, it's actually a very, very good gun. I like the styling of this. I wasn't sure about the original WS, but I think with this, it's just the green coloured caps. Now the original LS400 had a green coloured cap and green coloured controls, but this is much more of a vivid green. It's more like a Kawasaki green. Kawasaki do some candy greens, and it's more like that. And simply just that colour actually makes these much more appealing to me. And you know, I know we're all funny. I'm a bit of a spray gun freak. For those that don't watch the channel frequently, I've got loads and loads of spray guns. I just love the things. So you know, I spend loads and loads of times mucking about with these things. I normally do bike stuff. Occasionally I do car stuff if I get asked to do it, or if someone in the family wants it done or whatever. But it's not something that I normally do. But it gives me a chance to use these guns a little bit more on some of the, you know, slightly bigger stuff. But anyway, as I say, a cracking gun, but I can't see any difference between this and the other one. If you see this gauge here, actually, it's I think it's milli. I have been told how to say this, and I've forgotten, to be honest. And I didn't expect to bring up the gauge, but anyway, that gauge is actually a cracking gauge. They make a digital version, as you see there, but they also make an analog version, and they're really, really good because they have a regulator in them. I do buy them. I'm not sort of like trumpeting their calls because I got given it. It actually is a really, really good gauge, but what it does do is it stabilises the delivery of air. Now normally if you've got some filters, if you've got like a free filter setup or something like that, you will normally have a regulator on that. With the LS400 you will have to pump that up a bit, unless you've got really, really big air lines, and by that I mean the diameter of the air being fed to the gun. Unless they're really, really big, you need to put the pressure up. Something like a, say, well actually for the clear coat on this, I used a GTI Pro Light or a Techno Pro Light, and I used it with the TE10 cap, and that doesn't actually use that much air. So I could run my setup at about 3 bar, and that gives me comfortably 2 bar at the gun, no problem at all. Whereas with the LS, I need to turn that up to about 4 bar just to be able to get 1.8 or 1.7 at the gun. And it's just purely the amount of air it uses. The SATA X 5500 HVLP version and the 5000 HVLP version do exactly the same. It's something like, I think I was quote about 16 CFM of air, so it's a hell of a lot of air these things use, which is what I was saying at the start, is it's probably not recommended for people at home unless you've got a really, really good air supply. They also do a couple of different versions of the tip. One is a slightly wetter version than the other. This is a 1.3. I went for 1.3. I say I went for 1.3. It was what came up. This came up on eBay as a second-hand gun, a hardly used second-hand gun. So I got it, and it was 1.3 anyway, which is what I normally use on this. Some of the other guns I tend to use a 1.2. But because these split tips tend not to put out quite so much material, I tend to go for a slightly bigger size. So 1.3 in this is absolutely fine, although most of the time I don't use a 1.3 for base. I normally use a 1.2. But as I say, in this it's absolutely fine. I didn't find that I wanted it on full fluid. Some of the time you do use it on full fluid, but this is a repaired bumper. You'll see that there was a couple of repairs, and I don't want to put it on too heavy. This is a solvent base coat, and if you put it too heavy on some of the repairs, you run the risk of getting like a small area where it just reacts, and you just get like a little pickling effect, or frazzling effect, whatever you want to call it. So I always tend to put 1 or 2 more coats on, but I keep all the coats lighter. So for this I had it 2.5 turns out for the first 2 coats, and then the second coat, the last coat, apart from the drop coat, was at 3 turns out, and it goes to about 4 for full fluid. So at no time was this on full fluid. As I say, I kept the pressure around about 25 psi. It's all something like this needs, and it's a really easy gun to use as long as you've got the air supply. It's a really easy gun to use because it does make putting on different colours. I do some candy colours and things like that, and I've found it works perfectly well with those as well. So yeah, a really highly recommended gun. Totally silly price. I mean, for some reason they're about, you can get a digital version. This one isn't a digital version. I've borrowed actually a WS400 digital version. I've got the non-digital, but I borrowed the digital version, and I'm having a bit of a debate really as to whether the gauge is that accurate on them, because it seems to be putting a hell of a lot of air through. Anyway, I'm diversifying, but yeah, I'm looking into that anyway. It seems to be different to my non-digital version. When the gauge at the bottom is staying the same, there seems to be more air coming through the digital version. Sorry, the non-digital version. But yeah, I'm as I say, I'm looking into that. When I find out what's actually going on, I'll tell you. But I like to find out what's actually happening before I say it, rather than say something that isn't quite right or whatever. So yeah. Anyway, so the results at the end you'll see are really good with this gun. So it is highly recommended. As I say, silly price. I know it isn't out everywhere, but most, probably half the world at the moment have got it. I'm going to try and get hold of an OBS version, but that will come when one comes along. I can get one at a reasonable price. I'm not going to pay the full list price for it because they're just silly money. I do like to buy my own stuff, and then I can say exactly what I think about it. But you'll see, if you watch the other videos, you'll see what I mean here about you'll see the 2 slits in line with the air horns. You'll see that on this particular gun, because the pressure is lower and the tip is different, it doesn't make much difference, or it doesn't make any difference. The gun is just as good as the Series 1, and the Series 1 isn't any worse than the Series 2. So if you've got a Series 1, unless you need to change it, I wouldn't bother whatsoever, because it's just not worth doing it. Anyway guys, thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Cheers, bye bye.